Salam, peace. Welcome to day 5 of our International Holistic Healing Symposium hosted by the Ansari Holistic Healing Institute. We would like to begin by acknowledging the creator of the universes, whom we call Allah. Please join me in the recitation of the opening chapter of the Quran, a daily reading for humanity. Dastur in Madad, Ya Allah, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Imam Ali, Ya Allah, Ya Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, Ya Shaykh Ahmad Rifai. Al-Fatiha. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Alhamdulillah, all praise and gratitude is with Allah. Our final day, but not final, of course. Alhamdulillah, Ansari Holistic Healing Institute has tremendous pleasure in sharing this platform with you, to be able to help you become the better version of yourself, to give you hope that there is definitely hope with Allah the Almighty. The Ansari Holistic Healing Institute is an international institute with practitioners and researchers from different complementary fields that truly reflect the multifaceted nature of holistic healing. With a rise in dis-ease and health issues worldwide, Sufi Master Sheikh Taner Ansari and Sheikh Mozayn Ansari observed this and noticed that there was still and is still a great need for a solution to these widespread issues. Through more than 30 years of research and clinical experience in the field of complementary medicine, they founded the Ansari Holistic Healing Institute, whose goal is to address dis-ease and health issues through information, education, and training. Tonight, without any exception, another dynamic moment, dynamic time, where we're going to be speaking to two amazing people. On our platform tonight, our first guest speaker, Dr. Na'im Moola. Dr. Na'im Moola is an integrative psychiatrist. On obtaining his Master's of Medicine in Psychiatry, he ventured into corporate as a clinical research physician. His role exposed him to the regional and global psychiatric community, allowing him to engage thought leaders, thereby contributing to the enhancement of his knowledge in the field, clinical research skills, and fostered a passion for sharing medical information. He has been a keynote speaker and facilitated conferences with his multidisciplinary health peers. He gradually shifted his clinical outlook, viewing all health conditions, including mental health, to be inherently a psycho-neuro-endocrinological, immunological disorder, enhancing his approach to patient management, moving away from a focus on diagnostic confirmation, formulally guided medication, and prescriptive psychotherapeutic modality intervention to viewing patients holistically. This resulted in his move to his current clinical position in 2020, practicing as an integrative psychiatrist. Na'im works to empower individuals in their journey to self-actualization utilizing a narrative that combines his knowledge and experience in psychiatry and psychology to unravel emotional logic, incorporating conventional medication, homeopathic, and nutraceutical products, that is, food that provide health benefits and prevent disease, nutritional and exercise guidance, mindfulness meditation, breath work, and eclectic psychotherapy. Dr. Na'im's topic tonight is The Story of Us, a narrative of health that attempts to address the philosophical, psychological, biological, and spiritual variables from conception to physical demise. Our keynote speaker for tonight, Dr. Na'im Moola, welcome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight.
Jazakallah, Rubina, and thank you to the Ansari team for inviting me to talk tonight. And I'm sorry for the mouthful for the introduction, and I hope this is not going to be too much for people to hear tonight as well, my talk. But let me take this forward from that. So yes, the story of us. And why the story of us? Because essentially we share so much in biology and makeup, every single one of us as humans. We are organisms primarily. The biology of each organism more or less are similar. But beyond that, we are unique in so many other variables, and this is where the narrative comes into play. But let's start at an arbitrary beginning point of conception and the sharing of genetic material between the mother and the father to start the embryo's development in the uterus, a safe space, we would think, but a starting point where many adversarial factors start to play a role. And just thinking about that, what would that be? They are the common ones of the nutrition of the mom, the infective risk of infection and infective state, or adversity of the environment that the mom is exposed to. And with this, what would then happen to the child? Of course, from a nutritional deficiency, there's developmental abnormalities, but I don't want to go there. I want to look specifically into the emotional side. And the mom exposed to adversities would more likely inherently induce a reaction of stress response, a survival state within her. This survival state is core to all of us. It is a very powerful defense mechanism that if we don't know what we're doing within ourselves, switches on. And it involves the endocrine system, involving the hormones of adrenaline as well as cortisol, and spreading to significantly impact dopamine release and all systems of dopamine. I'll come to talk about that a bit later. Sorry, I'm going to jump around a lot in my narrative, but it's the best way I can make sense of it. So if the mom's defense mechanisms are activated, or a survival state is activated due to adversities in her environment, the child is exposed to the stress hormones of the mother, the adrenaline and cortisol that will pass through the placenta. And the developing child now, the brain of the developing child, then is wired to a stress response before even making its first view of the world and the first breath that it takes at birth. This, unfortunately, is the case for a large number of generational traumatized individuals, where groups of populations through periods of history were exposed to significant adversities, as with World War II and other adversities otherwise before that and after, since with genocides that we've noted in our recent time. And these are unfortunately then generationally wired into the developing uterus in its genetic makeup, because that's where epigenetic changes. And what are epigenetic changes? I'm going to use big words every so often. They're snippets of pre-existing genetic material that change it and modify it due to every variable that we're exposed to in the uterus, as well as later through our developing period of our life. So these stress responses then change the developing uterus genetic material and activates its defense response before it even leaves the uterus per se, already bringing it out in a high stress state. We often get very sad when we hear about children born with neonatal cancers and things, but here's a child being born and it's already broken down its own biology. So something went wrong in the uterus where it should have been protected and come through to a healthy form at delivery. So this shows you how early the stress response starts impacting the developing uterus, where children are born sometimes with neonatal diabetes, thyroid dysfunction, all of these endocrine abnormalities coming through as a stress response that's activated in uteri by the mom's stress response. So the nurturing environment outside the mom keeping the pregnant mom happy, as all cultures talk about keeping her safe and happy and making life easy for the pregnant mom. So the pregnant child also has a better chance of a healthy state of mind. That's the starting point of where the variables can go wrong. Then comes this time of delivery and whether the child comes at term or comes preterm. And now, of course, with modern society and modern technological advances, a preterm baby in this modern era has such a good survival chance compared to say 100 years ago or 200 years ago, come in at 30 weeks or 28 weeks, and that child's survival rate goes right down. So in the quest of improvements of medicine, and enhancement of survival, we can take a child to neonatal ICU on delivery and prolong its life and extend its ability to survive beyond that fragile space. In doing that, we may save the life, but impact the emotionally developing individual's trust model already. By extracting mum from child and not allowing for attachment to take place as early as possible and securely as possible, creates the most common so-called childhood trauma that we're dealing with in psychiatry today. The bread and butter of psychiatry is essentially what we call a detachment disorder. An attachment disorder is where the nurturing bond didn't properly take place within that initial period of arrival to the world, and whether it's for illness of the mum, illness of the child, whatever else took them apart, or the adoptive process or foster care process that takes the child away from the nurturing voice of the mother that carried it for 9 months and the sound of that heart that carried it, the child knows it's abandoned already at birth. The organism child, not child person, organism child knows it's abandoned at birth already. And it goes into distorted survival state. Let's be fair. Even if that mom came back even 3 weeks later after an ICU delivery or admission, that child will never trust that mom throughout its developing, nurturing path in front of that mom thereafter. It is so distorted, or they have a distorted neediness model that throws them too immersively into the relationship with the parent that was withdrawn from them, but never a healthy bond develops thereafter. So an attachment disorder starts creating. And of course, this is going to be compounded by the variables of modern society, as we come to know, where the modern mom, if lucky, can spend 3 to 4 months with a baby, and thereafter she has got to go off to the big bad world. And then comes the daycare mom or the creche or something else. And whether we had a fairly good attachment, we have a rupture of it too early. And this child then goes into a distorted state of survival again and trust again as early as 2, 3, 4 years old, because as early as that we find our children being booked into these new creches and this modern, where you can see them on your phone and see them carefully lying there and all safe, but you're not there, so they don't care. They needed you to be right there with them. Whether you could see them made no difference. They needed to see you. So the nurture model fell short again there. And if we look at our closest primates, I'm sorry we have to relate ourselves to primates, but logically they give us body structure similarities, so we talk to that. They have a nurture model that goes close on to 8 years, our closest primate. They nurture their young, and nothing their young does in front of them is wrong. They would push away another adult and protect the young. And that's what a nurture model is. It's complete compassion, complete selfless compassion that was expected from the nurturing mother, and a giving of herself. So we always say we're selfish creatures, we're animalistic. We're not. If you consider the mother model, we are giving, we are all endearing of love for the new one in the room. However, that's the expected model of what we should have been doing, but the current model of modern society and the indoctrines of what we need to get on with to keep a balanced life, or what we tell ourselves at least, comes to complicate what we did it all for, our own children. So the time frame when we were supposed to be sitting in front of those developing young adults, individuals, we were away from them, and they were left a lot to their own developing minds on their own selves. So yes, we did play, we did interact, but a lot of the time, that world that they were coming to grow to know, because they were newcomers and they were blank slates when they were born, so everything they knew had to be transferred through a sharing process of nurture from parent, mother, and father to child. And unfortunately, if there is no balance of parenting, let's be fair, what parents call themselves as parents and what happens behind closed doors of many different homes are so many different variables of what a parent can be. And I'm not going to go into all these different variables. We're going to talk about some of the most problematic variables that can impact the developing mind coming through. So here you have this young developing individual, which is now more the philosophical sense that we need to talk into. And this individual has to create a sense of self, which according to psychology is around 3 years old. There's behaviors of awkwardness, of showing emotional awkwardness. So the sense of self starts to develop, and negative emotions of guilt or feeling bad, and the child hides and shows a blushing face, and that's the sense of self forming already at 3 years old. And that sense of self needs to be nurtured by the right EQ model. Yeah, I used another abbreviation, emotionally intelligent model. What is this thing called emotionally intelligent model of a parent that we need in front of a child? A model of a parent that, well, there's no right answer for this one, and I'm not a child care specialist or parenting specialist, but I'm going to talk into a basic requirement, I think, and that would be to be properly engaging. And again, what is properly engaging? Bad words, but engaging the child adequately, that they come to see themselves as an individual and not as a response to their environment. So they inward model and not out model. And this talks a lot into all of the Sufi parts, the esoteric parts of other religions, coming to know yourself. And now, of course, because we realize we're sitting with a lot of what we call in the adult world EQ deficient people. A lot of people don't know themselves. So here is the major area, or the main area of adversity and distortion that plays out, is that birth to 10, 12-year period of a child's life, where they are the blank slates at birth, and they are in a brain state that they're absolutely receptive to the environment for taking in information. And in the initial information is purely by sight and sound that they take in, and primarily by sight initially, because they don't know what to make of the sounds they hear. They cannot comprehend the sounds. Not that they also can comprehend sight, but they can follow sight for its repetitiveness of what they're seeing in front of them. So they learn to watch the lips of the adults and eventually say mama or papa, and then they see the hand, and from that to slowly getting the wave right. They emulate everything the environment does in front of them. Essentially, before they knew the words, before they knew the pictures, they just followed their actions. They learned to walk, to talk, to do everything, observing and trying and pushing forward on their own account as best they could learn. Of course, in this period, the EQ balanced parents played the most important role to nurture this child further to come forward confidently, not in a worried state or fear state of its environment, engaging with acceptability from the way the nurturing model looks, and not feeling rejected for behaviors it does. So all of this in the talk patterns and what gets exposed, and the behaviors of the said parents in front of their child from the time they're born, by the way, not when you think they'll remember from 6, 7 years old. From the time they're born in the room, how you behave, how you talk, how you shout, whether there's calmness to the environment, or there's a lot of door banging, erratic and sharp sounds. All of this plays a variable to this developing, either becoming a secure, grounded mind, or very unsettled. And then, of course, the model of availability, of emotional availability, physical availability of both the mom and dad at different times and different spaces along the way in a balanced format, continuously through this early phase is required. Now, I've said a lot of things, but obviously a lot of what I've said doesn't really come through to what people are living to in current society at the moment. The current model of parenting, and I'm not being generalized here, I don't want to generalize, of course, there's so many different unique parenting models out there, but for the way society drives an individual to, even their parents are outwardly validating to live up to society's requirement, living up to their parents' expectation, their husband's expectation, their children's expectations. We're living to outward modeling, outward validation. We don't ever have a sense of internal grounded compass. And not all of us, again, I'm not generalizing to overgeneralizing, but I'm just stating to the way modern society plays people from the time you're introduced to it, because your parents are a version of modern society that's in the nurturing home. Before you even got to school, before you even got to hear your friends talk, your uncles talk, your community talk, your church or your mosque or wherever your religious space talk, all of these variables form your priors. Your priors in the mind of you to how you relate to these variables. They call your autobiographical priors. These formulations take place from birth to 10, 12 years old in relation to all interactions and all experiences to creating your sense of ego self. Now, if we're creating an ego self already from a childhood version of us that is requiring an output validation of us to then say we are well worth to be here, which is what school tells us, come up first, second, third in races, class, maths, English, or even our madrasa became a school. By the way, I came out first in madrasa, and in my deen, I came out first, really. That doesn't make sense. We made it a schooling subject too. We lost the plot in a lot of ways. We found that there's output validation being chased. We compare our younger child to the next child. Why can't you be more like your brother? There we did it again. They need to now validate against their brother. Why can't you be more like your friend? Look at that guy in school, and look at that fella's child has got to be a doctor now, and why can't you be a doctor? And now we want to be a doctor, and we think maybe when we're that, we will make our parents happy. So invariably somehow there's a distortion in talk pattern going on in the background of how parents communicate with their children. And this talk pattern is the most significant, if I have to call it, personal variable that plays out in a home. Because like I told you, that child is born as a blank slate now. There's nothing in its mind. And we then somewhere in the middle of 3 to 6 years old, develop this thing called inner voice or self-talk. Right. Where do we get this self-talk from? This self-talk comes from the voices of our parents and how they talk to us and the developing child. Now, there's different talk types. There's a talk to talk type and there's a talk at talk type. Do you understand these concepts? Let's just put it like I'm talking to you people out there in the audience. I'm talking very respectfully. I don't know you. I haven't seen you all. And I'm talking to you. But if I talk at you, I wouldn't be talking politely. It'll come across quite cuttingly. It's like, you have to listen to me. I know what I'm saying. This is what it is about now. And I'll be very factual about what I think it is and what you're going to do with it. And that's talking at a person. And invariably, parents tend to talk at their children. They don't realize this because they're doing it to themselves, because they don't look into their minds. They talk at themselves in the mind. You idiot, you could have done better. Why didn't you do it this way? Could have lived up to, you didn't live up to this expectation. You should have done better than that person, because somehow your internal levels of expectations higher internally than outwardly. So we hold ourselves to a high internal account, talk against ourselves, disrespect ourselves every day for what we've done for ourselves, told ourselves we should have done better yet, even though we lived through that day and we did well enough for ourselves that day. And that model of disrespect then gets transferred as a talk pattern to our children, because we tell them what to do. Hey, don't go do that. Don't touch that. Don't eat that. Don't. We know better. You don't know anything. And the child never learns anything. So then he talks at himself. You idiot. You didn't make a parent happy, or this or that or the other. And that model of talk becomes an ingrained model of self-talk pervasively in one's mind, not knowing that we are the biggest disrespects of ourselves and disregarders of ourselves from inside out. And we blame the world for how we feel each day. Yet we said something to ourselves in the mind, create an emotional response to this big physiological process to our dopamine system. I'm going to come back to that system just now. Don't worry. But here we stuck with self-talk, and self-talk that I treat every day in adults, sometimes on their deathbed, still trying to talk to themselves, right? They carried it through their lives, never knew what they were doing to themselves, was disrespectful, got angry with their parents in the process, because somewhere along 13, 14 years old, coming away from your parents, you got very irritated, rebelliousness came out. The so-called rebelliousness of teenagehood came out. Why did it happen? They fed us, they sheltered us, they educated us, they clothed us, they did everything for us, and yet we wanted to rip them hearts out because they were talking at us all the time. They never engaged us in our life, and that model of talk made us feel disempowered in our own lives. Organisms coming to become adults talked at, even after the point of becoming adults, let's be fair, people culturally 13, 14 years old, all cultural married people off. You're a man and a woman at that age. If you can procreate and reproduce, you're a man and a woman. So biologically, we hit adulthood by 13, 14. But by societal structures, the social anthropological philosophy of, no, until you leave school with a metric, you're a nobody, and you got to get through university, then you're really a somebody. And so that's why we pushed those so-called kids that became young adults in front of us to get first, second, third, still, and metrics telling them, you'll sit and study, you won't go out, you won't do. We control that adult now even further. And of course, they fight back. So modern society's production of teenage rebelliousness was not a thing we really had to deal with 400, 500, 600 years ago. So essentially, this is a modern creation, ultimately. And now, where you have a loving home with every other intention of provisional love, just being so badly messed up by emotional talk love, it's a messed up talk love, ultimately, that drives distortions in households, and people can't think beyond it because, well, he said it that way, it's hypocritical, he says this and he does this, talk about being respectful, but he talks at me like that. Hypocrisy plays out in our own households. Why did this take place? Because the parents didn't even know themselves before they became parents. And then they became parents and they taught children how not to know themselves. This generational baggage has been going on now for many, many generations. And unfortunately comes the variables of what family talk, differences, the community impacts, the schooling impact, and all these other variables, because there's so many variables. We don't see how these variable dominoes come from every direction. You'll assume things to be black and white and say, I blame my parents for what happened now. Not falling back the genetic pathways, the ancestral pathways, the impacts of society at different times, or spare the rod, spoil the child, children not seen, not heard, all these kind of things that society indoctrinated along the way, parents wanting to be good parents adopted along the way to be best of parents for their children. And we're dealing with what now has become this massive, massive epidemic of mental health playouts throughout the world. Yes, oh, don't look at it from the DSM sector. Oh, it looks even worse because they broke down so many diagnostic criteria. And now, my God, if I drink too much water, I got a problem too. But anyway, all of mental health then becomes triggered by an inner drive to validate in an outer experience of the world, destination happiness, ultimately. We chase the destination happiness through our metric, through our partner, through our university degree, through our career, through our big car, through our house, through our, whatever it is, we think something is going to make us feel validated and good now, we've achieved. And that is unfortunately structured in the way society is put together, because society is trying to pull a whole lot of individual variables together and make them work together, and for the outcome of civility and work and looking after the young and the old and education and cohesiveness. And so a very good intention in society and structured in the best way they thought at the time. And it's been structured multiple times over history, let's be fair. So it's been structured recently to this one, and it's not working, unfortunately. So we are all validating outwardly. Even parents are validating through their roles. Children are validating to follow the models of their parents and seek their validation, feeling said, well done or something. You don't hear that from your parents. You feel you're not living up to their expectations. You feel you're a disappointment. But their model doesn't tell you when you do good. They talk to when you need to improve. And we hear criticism. We don't hear what we need to hear. We hear selective hearing, but we would, because the newbie in the room was the child, isn't it? The newbie in the room would be the one who wouldn't be able to read between words and couldn't understand a talk pattern that may have come from a generation before, from times different. So we have a lot of cross-talking and talk at that goes on. The cross-talk is we don't understand each other. We assume we think they know what they're saying. And at the same time, people don't know how to talk. They talk with too much emotion. They don't talk their emotion. They talk with emotion, their facial expression, the tone of voice. And people get lost on the show rather than hear the message. So everything gets lost in the transaction of communication. And that's the bigger part that's going on, communication. Talking at on one side, communicating with yourself, and just communication in general. We don't know how to communicate. And with all of this running around chasing the world to look for ourselves, of course, we do fail finding ourselves out there, and we burn out, and we have midlife crises, and there's so many different variables, existential crises, and so many ways of describing what goes on by the mid-40s to the mid-50s in people in their chases of validation in their lives. And that essentially is to catch up with the trap of society eventually, that there was nothing there for you. And then we find people straying back to these spiritual concepts and gurus and so forth, looking for what it was all about in the first place. So essentially, where it goes wrong is the parents don't transfer the message of what life is about to their children before they leave home. They create a distorted model of what to expect and chase in life, and that's what life became to be about until we have to go back to decide what life is about. Oh, I think that one's quite simple, really. What is life about? But living life, really. And that's more the philosophical side. We're going to go into that a bit more just now. But so that's where the distortions are playing: communication, distortions of validation outwardly, and looking for oneself through to, unfortunately, incorrect paths, a lot of detours in life to eventually find oneself. We are looking for ourselves, we are chasing our tail in life outwardly. Yet if we just look in a mirror, and this concept of looking in a mirror is very hard for people. People find a lot of reasons to judge themselves. I'm too short, my nose is like this, I'm too fat. So they don't really look in the mirror to look in the eyes of the person who's been their best friend all their life, every day in the mirror for them. They judge that person to be something better the next day, or by the next 5 years, or a better mom, or a better partner, or could be smart, or could be wittier, or not good enough. So I'd rather just not go out and put burqa on and put the best way to hide myself from the world. We create the prisons of our mind through inappropriate thinking, through these outward variables that we thought we had to live to. And then we judge ourselves and create this prison that becomes mixed with either the EQ distortion that where I told you the children needed a balance-based EQ parenting to bring them from 3-4 years old to 12 years old, that pruning process where that the child always goes into, Mom, what about this? Dad, what if this happens? Mom, that non-stop questioning phase of life. It is so important not to say shut up there and try and answer them as logically to every one of those questions, because it's called emotional brain pruning. And if they don't prune that emotional brain within 4 to 8, 12 years old, and their parent model are not around them adequately, then they become internalizers. Often they get stuck in their mind and become the core psychiatric symptom, a ruminator, an emotional overthinker, because they had so many things they needed to make sense of but the nurturing couple of parents were not available for them, and the schooling structure was all about intellect grooming and had nothing to fairly based emotional grooming, and then the emotional mind stunts. Then the concept of emotional arrested development takes place, stunted emotional child takes place, the inner child concept, there's your emotional self that needed all this autobiographical pruning as it happened to you by the parental model of explaining, look at it this way, think of it that way, yeah, he's unfair, and this is what fairness is. And all those concepts don't take place. We're supposed to be the teacher will teach them all that, and we'll just play with them when we're at home and buy them another present when you come home, but teach them nothing in value of logic, of emotional grounding. And then suddenly when they become young adults and they learned all these other variables of watching us, remember I told you they emulate us, they just look at us, hear us. It's not as we say, it's as we do that they watch. And everything that we did starts coming back at us by 12, 13 years. They're snappy, they're rude, we say all these words, they talk back at us, but they do many me's. They're many versions of what they saw all the way developing in front of us, back at us, and we don't know how to take it now. And it's the other way around. And that's where the disrespect model of rebelliousness and fighting, get out of my house, my way or the highway, and all of those talk patterns coming. Because we think they're still children, they're supposed to respect us until they get married and leave our home. And until that point, they can't make any thought for themselves, decision for themselves, depending on the model of parenting, of course. And then this just complicates that much further now, as you see. And there's so many other variables that come into play. Their friends' experiences, what they're doing at home, how they manage their emotions, and then they see someone's drinking and we go try and drink and we smoke. Oh, there's someone cutting in the back. Oh, let's bunk school. And yeah, well, we show them all, this is how we take back our respect. We start forming gangs and we start grouping with people because we don't feel we belong here. We don't belong to our family. We start looking for, some people throw themselves at religion. Some people throw themselves at friendship groups and dysfunctional friendship groups. Some go to academia and become these A students, all looking to validate themselves through different models or belong at least, because somehow they don't belong to where they come from. Then on top of it, I have to say this, I'm a Muslim and I come from the Indo-Pak version of training of Islam. Yeah, we are grounded in a form of Islam that is not grounding because we're not given it in a form that we can understand it. And we're not even taught the language or when we were part to it. So well, how we said it back then was a parrot fashion. We just said a whole lot of things and didn't know what we said. And so where you were supposed to be taking a base of EQ, which is what religion is, unfortunately, is an EQ base where the people didn't know it, religion formulated it. And that's why all the scriptures were parables and talking how people thought of it. It's emotional intelligence. And we don't get our emotional intelligence structured in a proper language we understood. So we were blank checks coming into adolescence and adulthood in understanding true rights and wrong, other than some measures of what you saw your parents do and what you may have learned in talking. There were other measures you didn't get to understand better because we didn't understand the depths of our own scriptures. And scriptures, like they always say, we're aware of life, wasn't a religion. So they're actually telling you how to be good people. And EQ people that are balanced are good people, really. And that's what we were asking for. And that's where things started going wrong even further because of the way we were fed our religion. So a lot of us rebelled our religions because it was you will do or you'll go to fire and hell. And then of course we ran away from our best lessons as well in that early phases because they said if we wouldn't do it because of the way they said it to us, rather than engage us, make us love it and embrace it and then grow on that, we lost a lot of early grounding. So here we got EQ starved, and that's where the EQ starving is coming from, and the stunted emotional child concepts come from. And this is independent of anything really traumatic happening yet, isn't it? I just talked about normal life, isn't it? Now understand how badly psychopathology goes from there when there's a molestation or a rape or abuse or true abandonment and a true physical attacks and things. Then it gets that much more complicated. But it all starts on a spectrum of a distorted survival state. All right, I think it's time we start talking about the survival state and what goes on in the physiology of the human and the so-called dopamine system I mentioned earlier. Because, yeah, this is where it all plays out from the biology. And then we'll talk about who controls the biology from inside out. So the survival hormones are two hormones I mentioned earlier, adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline and cortisol fire from a small gland on the kidney called the adrenal gland, and they release through into the blood and circulation and switch a blueprint on of multiple changes in our physiology at times of stress or adversity. Let's use adversity. I don't like the word stress. A challenge. And so what switches on? It's the adrenaline releases and converts the dopamine surge to different pathways of dopamine. And there's 5 pathways in dopamine. There's a pathway that comes to this part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. This is the new part of the brain. They call it the neocortex. Is what makes us different from animals. It's where our cognitive powerhouse comes up, our ability to understand cause and effect in such a detailed way, and planning, executive function, appropriateness of behavior, consequential behavior, and it is the regulatory powerhouse of the rest of the brain. So it is your processor, your main processor of the brain. It goes through variables and figures out what you want to do with the information you see. So dopamine comes there and it goes online sharper, you're more awake, you're more focused, your attention is enhanced under the stress response, you take in more peripheral sound, peripheral vision into your processor, your deeper process. The second part that dopamine goes, the deeper process in the limbic area of our brain. That is where the emotions are processed and all other variables that your peripheral and other information is taking. This vets it against stored memories and vets it against previous experiences and things like that to best otherwise behaviors in the moment, and it gives you your gut feel and your hair on the back of your neck. So your subconscious communicates with the conscious mind through body talk, and body talk are all those variables, as well as emotion is a variable of the body talk. So there's my first introduction of emotions now. The next pathway goes to the small of the brain, which is the cerebellum. And in the small of the brain, it minimizes unwanted movement. So if you were under attack of a predator, you can actually lie so still, the predator may not see or hear you breathe and walk away from you. That's how still you could lie when that part of the brain is working. Then it goes to the heart and blood vessels. The blood pumps stronger, the blood tone goes up, blood flow to the head and neck and limbs increases because that's required to fight and flight, and blood flow to the gut is reduced. Then it also goes, the dopamine surge goes to your muscles, neuromuscular junction, your muscles prime up, it gets tighter. You can get the strength of 10 men or women in the state of acute fight or flight state. And this is all primed up survival state. And in that state, other hormonal requirements of procreation, metabolism, food digestion processes all reduce because you may die, you told yourself. So how you activate the state and how you use the state is so important. And dopamine is the main neurochemical that plays through this emotional state. And all these various pathways. And dopamine is your main emotional neurochemical. It drives good feeling of euphoria, hedonism, aggression, irritability, anxiety, rumination, psychosis. It takes you to emotional extremes as a chemical, depending how your thinking plays it as well. And thinking is core to how you started thinking in the early phase of your life and how your parents talked at you, and that internalized your self-talk pattern, your thinking pattern. There's so many variables here, but that will determine whether dopamine plays excessively or not in the background. So this survival state in a heightened appropriate response gives you the strength of 10 men, vision that can see things in distance, and hearing and hear the slightest movement, and the strength, your blood flow primed up, you're breathing in a rate that gives you more oxygenation, your muscles are all tense, you are in heightened alert. Good. And usually it comes to your defense that all of this plays to you surviving. Now, in modern society, where these defense mechanisms were previously wired for physical threats and defenses, in modern society, in the way we learn to use our mind, we use our mind to be our own threat. The way we self-talk, the way we doubt ourselves, the way we think this will be the end of us, this is too much for me, I can't do this today, whatever we say, our self-talk becomes the switcher that switches on the survival state or off. So we become so rude to ourselves and distorted to ourselves that we tell ourselves negative things most of our life and cause ourselves to live in distorted survival state. Yet we will blame the boss is bad, or my husband is terrible, or my children are disrespectful. But they may be all of that in behaviors to what they may be. But our response to them in way we tell it to ourselves and how we say we can cope with this or can't, this is too much for me, it's going to be the end of me one day, then activates this distorted survival from inside out. So the self-talk now becomes one of the most self-destructive things in the internal process if you start to understand this. This is why, if you don't understand self and learning to know your levels of talk from behind your mind, well, yeah, we're going to go into the mind talk just now. But anyway, so I'm talking about the dopamine. Now, for a person that doesn't know how to live in appropriate, calm, relaxed state and lives in a distorted survival state, because they may have been born in a distorted survival state, I gave you intra-uterine factors of variables that can trigger for you to distort, or just at birth factors, leave that everything else in nurturing was taken care of. The survival state never switched off because they were born in that. Now they live in a distorted survival state. If you see some toddlers, that toddler that's bouncing all over the show, not comfortably playing with other toddlers, needing attention all the time, is a distorted survival state toddler. Another toddler sitting in the corner, withdrawn from the rest of the group, quite adequately comfortable to play on its own for hours on end, is also the introverted toddler. That's a distorted survival state toddler. And these behaviors, as they get a bit bigger, become your output behaviors of an ADHD type child or an inattentive type ADHD child. Already distortions in survival state, which then give distortions in dopamine balances in different pathways, giving you different symptoms of presentation at different ages. So dopamine imbalance in your restless, unwanted movement pathway will give a child to be hyperactive and fidgety and restless and runny and all over the show. The impulsivity pathway, lack of regulatory control because the child's a poor sleeper, and dopamine imbalance there gives you impulsivity and jumping and pulling. The other part, the intimidate pathway, rumination pathway, dopamine overactive there, the insecure child withdrawn and playing to itself there. So all the variable symptoms of presentation come from the different pathways. And invariably, this is also manipulated from outer variables as well. So let's be fair, I told you dopamine is your major neurochemical for emotion. And of course, you get a screaming parent, and then you release more dopamine on top of already being a fear response. On top of the scream, you release more dopamine. And if you give too much tea to a child or coffee, the child plays with lights in his eyes beyond sunlight, or any individual, leave that, it's an individual in general. Too much coffee, tea releases more dopamine. Too much light after dark keeps our awareness mechanism awake. Dopamine's been released. Play with our emotions, watching movies and watching sport. Oh, my team Manchester lost and I'm crying about it. That's my dopamine that came out there. Go and smoke a joint if you're a smoker of joints, or use a drug. Dopamine is released, and we manipulate dopamine all of the time. Ads in papers and books and things. Look at that beautiful person. We manipulated our dopamine. Drink sugar. It's the biggest manipulator of dopamine because we feel good when we drink sugar. The most addictive drug in the world, everyone, is sugar, by the way. We'll come back to that. We have to talk drugs out there. But anyway, dopamine is released there. So inside, you've got a physiological response that is distortedly releasing dopamine. And then you've got an emotional reactive mind that is not emotionally grounded because there's a poor EQ model. That's why you already got a distorted survival state going on. And that now is triggering its own dopamine release from overthinking inside. And then you've got a fear-based response to intimidation from the outside that releases dopamine. And every nutritional variable and otherwise, and distorted sleep patterns, breaking your dopamine. And suddenly you become my client, because then the dopamine imbalance breaks you out to have vibrations through your body, or thoughts that are obsessively playing through your mind that you can't switch it off, whether it be paranoid or anxious based or obsessive based or compulsive based, whatever it is. It is just going wrong. And then whether there's a eating disorder, comfort mode, impulse control is lost, with sleep disorder, REM sleep and rumination playing out through the night, not switching off, a chronic REM sleep disorder, eventually giving a mind that runs away from it because it's not regulating hypomania, mania, or physiology running away from the adrenal surges, palpitations, tight chest, knotty tummy, muscle tension, spasms, and all of this going on unabated become the mainstream medicine patients as well, because there's your psycho, your self-talk, nerve pathways, endocrinology, hormonal shootouts, endocrine responses. Eventually, you suppress your own immunity. Cancers break through, autoimmune conditions break through, you break your physiology, hypertension breaks through, diabetes breaks through. So what starts off as a self-talk, self-disrespect process becomes the destructor of your whole body. From inside out, we are self-fulfilling prophecies of destroyers of our sense of self-worth, because we were not introduced to ourselves conceptually appropriately by our parents, not by fault short of their own, but because they were sabotaged from behind. They didn't know these concepts and lived it dysfunctionally in front of us. And we've got generational people not knowing themselves, trying to live fulfilled life to outward danglings of society, and then come to meet me along the way to say, "Doctor, who am I?" Most common question I get asked, statement, I don't know who I am. And that's true to the fact people don't know how to make sense of self. When you're living outward of your mind, and there's talk to thinking now, I said I'll come back to this thought of thinking. Thinking, we said by psychological assessment, is about 6 layers deep. And 2 of the layers plays here in the prefrontal cortex in most cases, and the rest play in the sublimbic area of your brain. But because we don't know and how to play with the emotional brain, we have blocked off processes by not knowing how to make sense of autobiographical prior information, and now don't even know how to get into the subconscious brain. The deeper layers of thinking, we are trapped to our own. So this deeper layer of thinking goes to from a non-reflective thinking person to awkward thinkers to the deepest layer being a guru level of thinker, the expert thinker, who detaches his ego sense of self to seeing every thought pop in and seeing the more appropriate, not running to the first one that hits his tongue. So an intention seeker of his own thoughts from behind, the Sufi part, check your intention again, check your intention again, check your own thought process backwards, know thyself. And of course, this comes through Buddhism, it comes through every other esoteric part. Know thyself before you go on to know thy world, basically. And when you're your master, then you can master your world. But when you try to master the world, you'll always stumble and fall if you hadn't mastered yourself. And that's where it comes back to. And there's top of mind thoughts, that self-thinking, self-talk process. People think they know themselves in the way they talk at themselves, but they talk at themselves, they never got to know themselves, a very superficial relationship they have with themselves. So invariably in the world, to other people of the world, they have very superficial relationships as well. You see sincere people and superficial people, not because they choose to be superficial, they don't know that that is not deep, depth or authentic relationship. They do it as best they know it, and they know it as best they've learned it, and they learned it from their parents and structures of society around them. So we don't blame anyone for what falls short, but you have to sit back and observe in a mirror. This mirror work concept now comes in. It's so important to go and look in a mirror, not really look in a mirror, but to understand your own behaviors in any moment. People are because we're seeking validation outwardly, we only look at outward variables of what caused what we are and where we are. So we're quick to blame outward, we're quick to blame the school, the this, the that, our parents. But we forget who was also there. Look in the mirror, who was there when they were doing that, who was there when the school was there, and how were you internalizing, how were you in the moment energizing that space to give you what information, or rebelling that space, or shunning that space. And so people don't look in the mirror to understand their role to how they became themselves in their lives. They play out all the outward variables and complain along those variables and use those variables to define internal experience of self, because they've always used outward to define inward. I hear a lot of people that come to see me 15, 20, 30 years down the line of a trauma and talk about the trauma as it defines them, because they didn't know what to do with the trauma, whether the trauma is a loss of a significant other, whether it's a loss of or trauma of molestation and abuse. But they get fixated in the trauma, and their sense of self, they believe now, is defined by the trauma because it's an outward-in experience. Yet the sense of self is defined from the inward out, and that's why they stuck there. They didn't know it was defined from the inward out. They didn't take in that concept in early life. And that's why what I see in my field are people not traumatized, really. Yes, they learn through adversity, live through adversities of life, but the individuals who don't know how to assimilate the information that now sits in their brain because they didn't know they had a deeper process book that can work in there. And that trips them up with these symptoms of shudders from behind, because thoughts play out in the back of their mind. They don't know where it came from, what played out there, or they don't think they, but they had a stress response, an anxiety response, a bad dream that night. So there's so many things in the back of their mind they're not aware of, because they put a lid on it when they came across it in the early phase of their life, because they didn't know what to do with it, because they were not guided to do. So that's the baggage from behind, our deep recesses of our mind that trip us up, our shadow that catches us out, makes us make these choices in front of us repeatedly in particular ways, go give ourselves in relationships in particular ways, be that very giving friend, the overreaching sister, be whatever it is out there, just thinking because I need to do that because I don't feel good enough from some childhood issue, and invariably complicating adult transactional relationships by childhood variables and creating the chaos of modern society to what we have to deal with out there. So yeah, I've had this interesting part of trying to make sense of all of this, because I started off with DSM as a very fragmented way of trying to understand psychiatry, and then trying to put a narrative to what they gave as a symptom complex and diagnostic entity, and then trying to see a bigger picture of treatment. And so this is what brings me to where holistic psychiatry is all about and integrative work is. I talk about this main system, this dopamine neurochemical system that's so wired up by modern society, inwardly and outwardly, and that's how your strings are pulled. And that's where I start off with in my treatment process. Detox that system. Detox that system from an eating, drinking perspective, detox that system in such a way you don't antagonize it and stimulate unnecessarily at night. So physiological sleep patterns. I talk to learning to still the mind. Of course, we know zikr, but there's meditation, there's mindfulness, and it is the same thing. You stop and think about it in many different words. Learn to still your mind inside you and not engage any thought process or any sense process, and do that as repeatedly as many times in a day as possible till you train yourself like you would with A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, to do it on command, which is what the sheikhs and the gurus and all these people can do. Just zone in and zone out on command. And of course, practice makes perfect. So meditative processes, mindful breathing processes. Why mindful breathing processes? To activate parasympathetic breathing, relaxed state breathing, breathing with one's tummy. So deliberately 5-minute interval, 5-minute sessions over 2 hours apart of deliberate breathing in one's tummy, in through one's nose to the count of 4, pausing to one's and out of pursed lips to 6, and fixating on cool sensations going in, warm. So all the sensations of breathing, movements of breathing, making sure your tummy rises and that. And doing that for at least a 3 to 6 month period, every 2 hours in your day for 5 minutes, to train your body to breathe in a relaxed state. Because if you force breathing, and that's your power of our body, breathing, to breathe through relaxed state, the rest of your physiology just follows suit. It just, you can't breathe relaxedly and be tense. Your physiology is then just being hijacked to listen to you. So by doing this on a repetitive approach, we actually train ourselves to be in a relaxed state. But more importantly is, like I talked about, this concept of self-talk. If that's not adjusted, anything one does on the outside is ever going to change an internal experience. So people say, how do I do this? It's very simple, of course, because really you have friends, and I'm sure, and this is what people will find is, to everyone outside our inner circle of our heart, which means our children, our parents, and maybe extended family members, we have a very different talk pattern. Who we are in our houses and who we are to the community are two different things. We somehow talk to people of the community, but our love talk is talk at people in our home. Go watch this. This is a dichotomy of presentation. You must consider this, but it's true. And essentially then, we know how to talk respectfully, but our love talk is disrespectful. So the way we talk to strangers of the world is the way we should talk 1 million times better to ourselves. That's the starting point. And no, I make this very deliberate as a recovery part. I make people actually stand in front of the mirror, look into their eyes, and talk to themselves looking in their eyes. Because let's be fair, when you respect someone and you're being serious to someone, you look them in their eye when you talk to them. And so if you're going to start respecting yourself, you're going to start looking in your eye and start talking to yourself, looking in one's eye. And already people have difficulties doing that. Then I remind people to be grateful. People forget gratitude. So I make it very deliberate that they start in the morning with their brushing their teeth in there. While they look in their eye, they can do a mental conversation and go through a list of gratitude. And it's so deliberate that you have to start off with the fact that you can stand in the mirror and look in your eye, that you have life in you that morning. And there's the starting point. There's the gift. It's still in you. So if you got the gift, which was the gift of life, then you're good to go. And if you can stand in front of the mirror, brush your teeth, then all your faculties seem to be working. And everything you need to be a success in this world is packaged in you already and still working. So you're still very good to go. And then, of course, just looking at where your conveniences are and that bathroom you're in and the bedroom you are, already there's so many things that you have to be grateful for that have just made your life so convenient and easy that morning. You didn't have to fight to survive. There's no survival. It was easy. Then you have to ask yourself, what really is my problem? Because then if you said all of those things, you can't seem to find a problem. But on top of that, once you've set a list of gratitudes out for a day, to start a day, you need to talk to yourself about who you were up to this point of your life, whoever you are, whatever your age is. You seem to be good enough to the age you are to be able to stand in the mirror. So one concept I tell people to think, well, let's learn that you can trust yourself. Because to that age, despite not living the perfect life, you live life good enough to keep yourself alive, to be able to look at yourself every day, to go on with the next day of life. So trust is a concept to understand of yourself, that despite not being what you thought you needed to buy a list from internal, whatever they created in the earlier versions of you, that internal list, I need to be like this, I need to be like that. But you were good enough to who you were to be where you were already, to be grateful for that. So validation process, talk to the youngest version, all the doubts of you, yet you came through the doubts of you of every year, the schooling challenges, the romantic challenges, the working challenges, to be still here. So why doubt you? Just acknowledge you to being okay enough to get on with it. Yeah, you can learn more. You could be better at something, and that's something we'll talk to differently. Then I take them into the affirmation roots of how beautiful this day is going to go. Because we assume to talk to a day like we've met it before. We are predictors of our future. I'm going to have a shitty day today. Sorry, as I use that word. It's going to be tough. My boss is going to make my life hectic. We assume roles with our partners, with our creator, to predict the future and create a future. We don't know in that, just thinking like that, how we go against our belief systems. We live in hypocrisy. We talk in hypocrisy. That's why if we don't vet our own thoughts and thinking from inside out, we've already disrespected everything we said we stood for by living just a few moments of thinking. That's how dangerous thinking can go in our minds. So we got to talk with affirmations to a day we just met and has so many minutes in it and so many seconds in it, and just because 5 minutes was hurt by someone doesn't mean I had a shit day. Sorry, again, I use that word, sorry, a bad day. It should be, it was a few bad moments of the day, but we don't then talk badly to ourselves. We nullify beautiful days with moments that went wrong, and talk to the moments that were wrong, and remind ourselves of those moments when we sit in conversation with our friends. By the way, you know what happened there? And we remind ourselves, because when we thought it again, we said it again, we heard it again, we reminded ourselves how bad our day was. And then we carry that energy home with us. See the self-sabotage of a self-talking pattern. Even when talking to those dear friends of ours and family of ours, we will talk as a talking pattern of either pessimism, complaining, or optimism, the beauty of the day. And just watch, if you don't understand that most people always want to share their life, and they share their life in communication, either in a negative way to seek sympathy and emotion, or in a positive way to seek approval. You'll watch patterns of transactions of communication. You'll understand we are floating on people a lot, which is unfair. And two, we're reminding ourselves negativity, which is also ridiculous, that we want to remind ourselves of 1 or 2 bad moments of our life. And the fact that we always talk about our traumas all the time. Oh, I lost my father 5 years ago. Yeah, then we want to keep ourselves hooked and anchored in a past with a reminder of a focus to say that was the most important thing. I lost him, rather than I lived alongside him to that point that I lost him, and the life was the important. We could narrate the whole event in a different way. We talk about the loss, and the focus is the negative. It was a loss, and I'm so traumatized now. The stringing of the words can just put the whole thing into distorted concept in your own mind, even though you trying to say something that could have said this said a bit better, and then uplifted yourself in, I really missed him, and it was such a good example. It was, now it's still a sore point, and he's gone, and I can't do anything with that info in my mind other than feel sad. We sabotage our minds invariably by the way we talk. So yeah, holistic healing starts from inside out. Unfortunately, it is not difficult though, fortunately, and it does take consistent, deliberate attention to doing it. So people don't know to consider themselves in their lives often. They forget themselves and the last person in their day to consider for themselves, unless this is done prescriptively for a while. No, not prescriptively so hard that I force them, but they force themselves. They put alarms, reminders, and these vibrating phones and watches on their hands to remember yourself, put a band on your hand, to be kind to yourself, smile, take a moment for yourself, drink your tea or something, looking at it and enjoying it. Be mindful to that moment and appreciative of what you have, rather than living to the next or crying about the past. Well, this one was obliterated for the beauty of what it has while you were living it in that moment. So grounding oneself in mindfulness, in the technique of being in the present, in awareness, in a full experience, in the gift of life, which is the experience of life. If you're living in your head, you're missing your gift. If you don't embrace your day, you're missing your gift. And every day, I mean, I've met a lot of people who wasted their life because they weren't present in their life while they lived their lives. And so, yeah, that's my narrative in a nutshell. I did jump around a lot, and I hope I didn't confuse too many people in the way I took you around the storyline. And there's more detail to it, but I don't want to overwhelm you with big words and jargon, which, yeah, we can do that if we need to. But there's the gist of it, and there's more variables on how to improve on it, but these variables change from individual to individual for holistic care and change of their life. But it involves diet, it involves sleep, it involves drink, it involves stimulation of the mind, it involves going back to your belief systems where spirituality talks. Because we learned belief systems somewhat in the distorted in the pathway, but we learned Western belief systems, and then we live in hypocrisy by our model of example of our parents, and then we don't live to our belief. And that's where the spiritual crisis or existential crisis, or whatever happens in your late 40s, mid 40s, or most people, or some people get it early in their life, I must say, please not time frame it that way. But these crises happen because we're living in discord to a spiritual self or belief self and the worldly self, and the body is caught between the two in their choices, of course. And that's what's my take on this whole picture. Thank
wow,
you.
Dr. Na'im. Yes, exceptionally powerful, very, very interesting. I love how you took the narrative and you went, and I'm like, is there hope? Is there hope? Is there hope? And yes, at the end, there is hope. And I'd like to just comment, ask, there's some people that have commented over on the chat. I'm going to share it with you. Okay. We got one of the ladies says, really good talk, Dr. Moola. The other participant says, loving it. And then we have a very good picture of EQ and religion. Thank you for this connection. Hi, Doc, going well. And then we have, by the grace of Allah, we somehow can become kind, thoughtful humans. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Then we have another comment, very important talk. Alhamdulillah, one tool to have is to move past transactional level 1 communication and positional level 2 communication to transformational level 3 communication, conversion. As a doctor, I'm sure that comes from Dr. Kamila. And then we have, a question now, how can a person thrive around a negative person, a young adult around a negative sabotaging parent?
Yeah, how can one thrive? That's where psychopathology is distorted. Not that one can't thrive unless one's EQ grows faster than the parents. And that is so possible. And that's where good counseling and EQ transfer support structures out there can take a child to actually be the controllers of the parents, not in a negative way, but like you parenting your parents, understand that, but in a nice way that you actually talk to their insecurities in a way that, so this is doable, but it's a communication as well, and a skill that you have to get trained on not trained so much, but transferred through to a counseling service. Yes, you can still thrive in such awkward. Let's be fair, if we can master the adversities of our nurturing environment, the world is at our feet.
Alhamdulillah. And then we have another question. How can we promote positive learning of life in ourselves and our children?
I told you about this gratitudes affirmation. Start with reminding yourself. And if you remind yourself and you share it every day with another, it just becomes a habit. Habit is what we want to create. That's why I say deliberately for a while, put alarms and reminders to say good things to people, to take a time to compliment people. The more you do it, the more you create a habit within yourself. And eventually within 3 to 6 weeks, this is your second nature. To say optimistic outlook statements rather than say, oh my God, COVID's so bad, people are dying. Yeah, go with that. People are surviving and life is getting on. You can still say it in that way. And there's more of an optimism to it. So the way you load your words and the way you talk makes a big difference to the energy you leave in the space to with another. So we can offload on another, or we can enhance another. But we need to not always take responsibility for others. We must be importantly responsible for ourselves. Obviously, if we are talking that talks of beautiful words, we are taking first responsibility of our internal environment because we thought the good words, then we said the good words, then we heard the good words, and 3 times over we feel good about our words. See the power of ourself in our minds? We can create the best environment, the bliss, the Garden of Eden in our mind in the way we feed ourselves the seeds of positivity. And no, positivity doesn't mean be unnaturally happy about everything in life. It's just going to go perfect, but optimistic that there's always something that can be done to improve the situation. And there's help from another when you reach out, obviously. And no, we can be better versions of ourselves every day, as long as we identify what can I do better rather than say to ourselves, I'm not good enough. And choose what could be better in a personality trait, in a behavior, in a behavior to your child, to your partner, and enhance oneself to that day, because that's truly what a masterpiece is in production all the time. So we don't longer have to be here to be a masterpiece.
SubhanAllah. There is another comment here. Inshallah, gratitude and forgiveness can overcome so many adversities in our lives. And, following scripture, and all the scriptures advocate mercy, kindness, compassion, forgiveness. And these are the qualities that we want to imbibe within ourselves. And I love, Dr. Moola, that you mentioned that the first person that we need to look at is ourselves. If we can speak, if we can speak kindly to ourselves, our internal dialogue is with love and kindness, then obviously that's what would, if we squeeze, what would then come out? Love and kindness. But if we have, as you mentioned, this, conversation within ourselves that is narcissistic and is, degrading, putting yourself down, criticizing, then obviously when we squeeze, what is going to come out? Exactly what you're saying to yourself. So I love that we actually have hope, and the hope is we don't have to depend on anything but obviously our connection to the Almighty, and know that we have the ability, and this is of course the free choice that the Almighty speaks about giving the human being. We have the choice to be able, that free will, that choice to be able to change our inner dialogue. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Moola.
Only a pleasure. Thank you again for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So viewers, Alhamdulillah, all praise and gratitude goes to Allah. As I mentioned again, all power and all knowledge comes with Allah. What Allah is sharing with us here on this platform, mind-blowing, life-changing. We always have hope. With Allah, there's always hope. So I hope that you enjoyed this presentation as much as I did. And inshallah, we're going on a short ad break, and then we're going to have our surprise guest speaker. Excited. I wonder who he is.
Would you like to learn how to connect with Allah through His beautiful names? Would you like to learn how to heal using natural remedies and modalities? Would you like to cleanse yourself from any negativity, black magic and nazar? If you answered yes to these questions, then the Ansari Holistic Beginners Healing course is for you. Empower yourself to healing, add this knowledge to your current practice, or let it be a new beginning of hope for you. WhatsApp +27 82357 8666.
Yes, welcome. Our next surprise guest speaker, yes, he is Guru Reni. And Guru Reni began studying Panchak Salat Mande Moda with Pa Herman Suwanda in 1981. In 1991, he was awarded his Guru certificate, at which time he opened the New River Academy in Santa Cruz, California. He continued his training with Pa Herman until his death in 2000, and he currently trains under Guru Basa Rita Suwanda. Guru Reni began his training as a Sufi dervish with Sheikh Tanner in March of 1992 and was his representative in Santa Cruz from 1994 through 2004. Panchak Silat Grakan Suchi grew out of a mandate from Sheikh Tanner Ansari to present a fighting art to Westerners that incorporates spiritual chivalry as taught in Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, Iran, and India. So for the last several years, Reni has been working to condense the volumes of information he has been given into a cohesive system that integrates his understanding of the Indonesian fighting arts with the spiritual development practices of Sufism. Panchak Silat Grakan Suchi should be viewed as Guru Reni's expression of Mande Muda developed under the constant guidance and feedback of Sheikh Tanner Ansari and Ibu Rita Suwanda. Welcome, surprise guest speaker, Guru Reni. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Forgive me, for I am incomplete. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'd like to thank Sheikh Tanner and Sheikh Muzain for working so tirelessly to raise me up, increase my capacity, and connect me to the source of this information, and helping me to tie together the threads of this amazing tapestry. Thanks, of course, also to my incredible gurus in Indonesia, Pendekar Herman, may Allah be pleased with his life, Guru Besar Dadang, and Guru Besar Rita, for entrusting me with the cultural heritage of Kisunda. And I'm very grateful for the presenters this week who have given us so much information. What an incredible symposium. At first, I was confused as to why I was asked to speak at this symposium of healers, because as a martial artist, I'm usually the one in need of the healing. Even that being the case, my teachers want me to share the importance of centering the work of healing in proper aligned movement. So because I'm not used to giving lectures, I'm used to teaching class, I'm going to make everyone, I'm going to invite everyone to please stand up where you are and do this with me. We're going to open class together. We're going to make this a class so that we can have the halqa together. So if you have room, if you cannot stand up, it's okay. Be where you are. But what I would like you to do is to stand in a relaxed position, and we're going to lift our arms, touch our fingertips. We're going to draw them down so that our hands cross in front of our hearts, and then come back down. Let's do that a few times together. Breathing. I breathe in. I breathe out. I breathe in. I breathe out. There. Thank you. You may, I'm going to sit down for a moment. Let me tell you a little about Penchak Silat. What we just did is the opening is called Ulin Napas, or it's the Sundanese word for playing with the breath, playing with the ego. And we're going to come back to that a couple of times in my talk here. So Penchak Silat has its roots in the great Hindu empires that ruled the Indonesian and Malaysian peninsulas for nearly a millennium, until the coming of the Muslims in the late 1400s. The art always had a strong animist and Hindu spiritual foundation from which to draw, but it was under the tutelage of Qadiri Sufi masters known as the Wali Songo, that's the 9 saints, that Penchak Silat reached its true flowering. Using the precepts of Sufi Chivalry as taught by Hazrati Ali, alayhi salam, the Wali Songo embedded both practical and spiritual knowledge into all of the cultural and social aspects of Southeast Asian life. So roughly translated, Penchak Silat means combat done artistically. Externally, it builds awareness as the foundation of self-defense. Internally, it uses knowledge density to fill every movement with layers of use and meaning. The practice of Penchak Silat gives both the treasure to be discovered, these layers of knowledge density, with the keys to unlock them. These keys are holistic mindfulness that come from training the nafs, the practice of consciously choosing the path of Allah's love over the path of our own desires. So the work that I have done with Gerakan Suci, the school that I have, expresses this way. The external goal of Penchak Silat training is the safety of yourself and those who are under your protection. The internal goal of Penchak Silat training is Tawhid. Tawhid is the unity of self, developed through a comprehensive mindfulness practice. The development of the student's mindfulness uses 3 tools: the physical, the mental, and the emotional. Your nafs are persistent and merciless, making any mugger you might face seem like a flower merchant in comparison. You must have awareness, deep awareness, to defend yourself effectively without clouded judgment or emotion. It is important, however, to distinguish yourself from the animals and common brawlers by making every movement spring from that source of beauty and grace. Further, you must acknowledge the source of your movement by dedicating every step to that which gives you breath, the divine. Gerakan Suci, which translates as sacred movement, incorporates all of these concepts into a comprehensive curriculum. These concepts are framed within the Shahada, the verses of the Holy Quran, and the most beautiful names of Allah. So here's a maxim. The human body provides us a laboratory for the understanding of the physical universe, from geometry to physics and any other science. It's not just our mind that can understand these things. We are given the tools to unlock them from the physical. The human body also, when awakened in Tawhid, together with the mind and emotions, unlocks the secrets of the seen and unseen through the soul's connection to the divine. So now I'm going to give you a moment, and then I'm going to invite everyone to do some more movements with me, but I'm going to share my screen for a moment and let you look at what I call my this is a constantly evolving diagram that I use to analyze my own state of being, my moods, my angles, and to help me be more in alignment with myself and my path, with opening myself to what I'm supposed to be doing in this life. I also use this as a method of analyzing students when they come to me to see where they are, to see how we can help unlock their potential. And eventually the point here is to attain mindfulness of intellect. That's it. We call that intention, that gained through critical thinking, critical analysis, understanding. It's your consciousness overcoming confusion. It's processing the aberrations in your thinking, and it's learning through the different practices assurances to the origins of your thoughts. Are they coming from your ego, from your nafs, or are they coming through true inspiration? And this mental discipline is mindfulness of the mind. We say attention is about the emotions, and sometimes we call this the heart, but it's the emotional body. And this develops discernment. This is feeling and connecting, empathy, overcoming fear, processing our traumas. It's control of our amygdala. This is our fight or flight response. Built into Pencak Silat is the ability to, when startled or faced with great trauma, to breathe your way through it and maintain focus. It's obviously also wisdom, and this mindfulness comes through emotional discipline. Presence, this is where we ground ourselves. The goal is presence, and we do this in the body, and we know we find this when we have certainty. And certainty is, another way we say this is langkah baraka, stepping with the blessing, knowing when to step and knowing when not to. This is our senses and our awareness, both external and internal, both zahiri and batini. It's our physicality, it's our survival. If you are certain that you are safe, then the ego can calm itself. We are not looking to destroy the ego, we are looking to train the ego. As our Sheikh always says, the ego is a donkey. Who's riding whom? Am I riding the donkey, or is the donkey riding me? This is touching and sharing. It's finding comfort in your own being, overcoming your desires. It's processing injuries and illnesses. It's awakening the fascia. And I leave a thing off here. It's awakening the fascia as it connects to the skeleton so that you are structurally sound within the gravity well. And this mindfulness is attained through physical discipline. I'm going to stop sharing. Now, if I can, I'm going to ask you to join me once again. I need to see myself so I can see if I'm in the camera. What we're going to do is another ulin nafas, another playing with the breath. And this is to develop our mental capacity, our ability to think clearly, to develop critical thinking and critical analysis. And there are many of these movements, but we're going to do a most simple one. This was actually the first one, but we're going to do another one where we're going to wash ourselves and then extend. I breathe in, I breathe out. Now, when you breathe out, you say, who, who, who. This is good for me. I'm a little nervous, so it's helping me settle down in my body. Thank you. Let me talk about that a little bit. You may sit down. I appreciate if you are getting up. I appreciate if you are not able to. So the vagus nerve is the one thing I've heard no one speak of this week, and it's unbelievably important. VAGUS, the vagus nerve, is calmed by breathing. And you will notice, as I mentioned, that Pencak Silat is a very, very old art, and it comes from India and is influenced by China and Indonesia itself, and all of its cultural and its cultural richness. So it looks very much like Qigong. It looks very much like the Indian arts of Shastravidya or different types of Kung Fu. That's because they all meld, and anything useful is carried forward in time, right? So doing breathing on a daily basis strengthens the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve controls, we'll ask the Dr. Na'im, who was just here, and some of these other wonderful practitioners, how the vagus nerve calms the nervous system, because nervous system attenuation is absolutely essential. To find your traumas, emotional, mental, physical, you have to be calm enough. It's like when you fall down off your bicycle and you've got adrenaline, that is not the time to start analyzing what's wrong. You just sort of sit there and kind of go, I hope I'm not too injured, right? Because you have to calm the vagus nerve again. Over time, this nervous system attenuation transforms the brain so that the amygdala does not go into full adrenal mode when surprised. This is one of the secrets of Pencak Silat. When you get offline here and you go, okay, what the heck is this? Let me go look on the internet, and you see people, you watch on YouTube, all the people doing Silat, and it looks very tricky. A lot of it has to do with this, okay? So that is Ulin Nafas, and that leads us through knowledge, through who. Okay, it's my way to make you, to ask you, I can keep saying, I'm used to being in class where I make everyone get up. I'm gonna invite everyone to stand again. We're gonna go back to what we did in the beginning, which is what we call Lam Alif. This is one of the keys. The breath for this is Allah, Allah. Notice I'm doing this pumping motion. It's very simple. Allah, 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 Allah. I will mention briefly for those that are, I am not an Arabic scholar, but this hand position creates the Arabic script of Lam Alif, and that is both a lock, hiding treasure, and a key. We will speak more of that as we go along. So in repeating the wazifa of Allah while doing this, we are sharpening and expanding our attention, our emotional attention. Also, and here's a secret, almost no martial art, one of the things that makes Pencak Silat unique is the fact that we cross our hands across the center line of our body. Here's the center line of our body. Most martial arts maintain their hands and their feet on both sides. Once we cross, we're asking our brain to think in different ways. We'll just leave that there as a sort of something to work on in the future, okay? Third thing, because I love doing exercise, as any of my students who are watching knows, exercise is one of my favorite things to do, not just for myself, but I could sit and watch people do it all day. So one more time, and this time I'm gonna aim the camera, pardon me, I'm gonna move my camera, I'm gonna aim it down at my feet. I'll just show you this. Do it as best you can. Don't worry too much about it. It's a little extra, but it's called the diamond step. So with the diamond step, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to step off at this angle. And then I'm going to step here, so you can see. I come up, I shift back, and now I'm going toe to heel. Come back, go toe to heel. Then I'm back. And then we can go both directions with that. One of the things that's important with this, in doing it barefoot, notice I'm barefoot, is I'm going to drop down my weight, put my heel out, directly out from this heel, and then I'm going to roll my weight forward onto the ball of the foot and the toes. This is the pathway to certainty, to stepping with the blessing. We'll teach that more in the future if people would like to learn that. But I wanted you to see that because this is an evasion step. If someone is coming at me with loudly, or they're actually attacking me or grabbing at me, we step offline. Our practice is to step offline. So we start from the ground up. The training always starts from the ground up. We learn to love the ground. We have a saying that says, gravity is our friend. On the other hand, it does not care for you that much. So we move our steps and our handwork to the rhythm of La ilaha illallah. This embodies stepping with the blessing, the lanka baraka, and to imbue our movement with presence. La ilaha, la ilaha. There is none. This is evasion. This is to invade or intercept someone coming at you. Il Allah is to supplant the position or destroy the foundation of an opponent, whether physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. So this all sort of ties around to the fact that the teachers want everyone to exercise more. One of the things that happens is over time, your ligaments and your fascia, and not just your muscles, but your ligaments, fascia, and bones decrease in fluidity and suppleness from lack of use. This is why Qigong is so important. The only real difference in Qigong or Tai Chi and Pencak Silat is that Pencak Silat is incorporating these deeper transformational practices. So speaking of transformation, transformation requires the accumulation and expenditure of spiritual energy. And I'm just going to mention this because I'm getting a little deep into it and a little slow, short on time. But let's say the three terms we will use are inculcation, entrainment, and investment. Inculcation, entrainment, and investment. Our sheikh, our sheikha, my teachers make rabita with the student and give them the energy to become their best selves, to follow, to hang on to the rope of Allah, to follow that path toward their better selves. They also act as a step-down transformer. You just reach out. I've met these people on the street, I'm sure you have, who are brilliant, and they kind of talk to themselves too fast, and they're writing symbols, and they've got the secrets to the universe. Is because they didn't have a step-down transformer. It burned their brain out. One of the first lessons, not the first lessons, one of the great lessons I learned from Sheikh Tanner was that sometimes we're just broken. Sometimes we just break ourselves. And our job is the healing at that point becomes functionality, joy, learning, development of our spirit and our soul. I've torn my back into shreds. My students know this, that I'll get up and I'll get all excited and I'll do stuff, and then I'll sit down because 40 years of the joy of doing silat has turned my lower back into a tight little thing. And I do exercises hours a day to elongate, and going back to what Alia presented to us a few days ago, doing myofascial work to open, do this, sit on my Rife machine to fill it with energy and keep the energy moving. So I'm still joyous, I'm still moving, and my back will never, ever probably be the back it was when I was 12. MashaAllah. Okay? So you learn, part of mental discipline is not wasting your energy. The self-talk that Dr. Na'im was talking about. If I can supplant, oh, what do people think of me? Oh, what should I do today? How should I eat? What should I eat? If you can supplant that with La ilaha illallah, or Allah, 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 or who, or better yet, have them all in concert at once, then you don't waste your energy. The energy that comes into you will, I don't want to say it stays, because the whole point is the energy must move, but you learn to harvest it, and so that you can go to those next levels. When our peer Abdul Qadir Gilani alayhi salam says that there are levels to the nafs, what he means is we're training them so that we can have more understanding, more awareness, more closeness to Allah, inshallah. Okay, I'm going to talk about two more things. One is there are 4 gifts. the gifts that a teacher gives to a student and that a student must present to a teacher. And they are respect, trust, patience, and zeal. And they're in this order because when a student comes to me, I respect them as a human being, that they are seeking something greater. I do not expect them to trust me. I'm doing this martial art where I have learned hundreds and hundreds of methods of maiming and killing another human being. And Alhamdulillah, I've never had to use it for that. I've only gotten to use it to develop myself. And I give thanks for that every day. But we start with respect. I don't assume that you're here for my betterment. I assume that you're here for your betterment, for your closeness, and that in putting out my light in the front door, you have answered that. And my job is to respect that. That develops trust over time. Trust is always earned, never given, because when I throw someone to the floor or I punch them and they come away having learned without being injured, and we'll have to ask my students if I can do that well enough, if I'm actually helping them learn. We always, yes, so then trust develops over time. And that they're not going to misuse this. I have to know that this person is going to come in and learn these secrets and then not go out and be a bully and mug people, okay? What does that develop in the student? It develops patience. At a certain point, you realize what you don't know. I've been, this is why I was surprised. Why am I the surprise guest? I'm just a student. I've only been doing this for 40 years. I started when I was 22, and I still haven't figured it out yet. Thank goodness I have good teachers who are patient with me as I am persistent in my pursuit. But in that comes zeal, and this is why I stick with it. Zeal is that joy. It's not just in silat, it's when you sit in halqa and the ideas of another person excite you. The excitement I have coming out of this week of listening to all these people talk about how they have healed themselves, how they help other people find healing, gives me more zeal. This all leads to connection and community. This is about refinement of self, internal forms of self-gentleness, and the adab, which is the externalization, the external forms of kindness and respect. We say you must be, to know, Dr. Na'im said, know thyself. This comes to being kind with yourself. I do wudu not just so that I can be clean and fresh in front of my students or my teachers. It's so that my inner self knows that I am concerned. So I want to touch on Sufi chivalry for a couple of moments. There's so much to talk about here. We know with chivalry is from the French word chevalier, which means horseman, someone on a horse. And to have chivalry is to get down from your horse to help another person. We see terrible images coming from the US border of border patrol agents on horses chasing Haitian immigrants. And you see the power both of lack of compassion and a horse. This is not chivalry. Chivalry is to get down off the horse, to say, I have been entrusted with power and knowledge. My job is to then serve and to find the weakest among us and lift them up, to make sure that the orphans have a place, that the widows have money, that the poor have food. And this chivalry originally comes from Islam. During the Crusades, as awful as they were, the knights sat down with each other and they shared halqa and they shared understanding. And many of the knights from the West would go back, changed people, because they sat with the Sufis. The Shahada, and I will just say this briefly, there are 9 conditions of the Shahada, of the testament to faith. They are knowledge, certainty, acceptance, submission and compliance, truthfulness, sincerity, love, denial of false gods, and adherence. If we have another 13 hours in this session, we can begin to unfold these, but I think that Sister Rubina will not let me go that long. So we will just put this out there for you to meditate upon. Remember that it's intention, and in any of these can be I can have intention with my feet, I can my body, I can have intention with my emotions, but we find it intention with the intellect, with the mind. Attention is knowing what is going on around you. It is having an open heart. It's being safe and secure enough in your personal, in your body, in your personal space to be open. And presence is filling your body with this chi, with prana, with awakening the fascia so that it can fill every movement. So when people see you move, they think, oh, Allah, Allahu Akbar. Yes? As we say, I will now make myself available for questions. As we say at the end of class, hormat, I give you respect, and thank you for the bruises.
Subhanallah. I'm going to read some comments and questions. Guru Reni, thank you. That was, subhanallah. Okay, we have, yes. One of the viewers says, mesmerized. That's what I'm feeling right now. Amazing presentation from Guru Reni. And then we have, in a world where we are so bombarded with negative stimuli, it's so important to practice mindfulness. But let's not underestimate that those 6 weeks go get used to it are not easy. It takes commitment. And for the diamond step, can Guru Reni tell us which foot he puts forward first, the right or the left?
We always begin all exercises to the left. And there are multiple reasons for that. But we also do everything in both directions, right? So this is just the very basic beginning, this diamond step, but we do many things with it, and we'll go in different directions. So, but generally we enter a room with the left foot. And it's funny because in Indonesia, you never do anything with the left hand because of cleanliness. Being right hand dominant, and most of humanity is right hand dominant, it helps to train the brain by starting with what you would consider the unconscious side, the left side.
Thank you. And then, are there any YouTube videos that we can watch to learn how to do these movements?
Inshallah, my own website will be done soon. We've been working on it very hard. You can go watch, there's lots and lots of Pencak Silat on the YouTube, and discernment is necessary, as with anything. There are lots of people who are completely external, and there are people who are internal. The work that I'm doing specifically is unfortunately still just with us, but inshallah, we will have that available soon.
Thank you, Guru Reni. And then we have a comment, Subhanallah, thank you for sharing Silat explanation. Walking with blessings of Allah. This is amazing mindfulness. And then thank you, Chivalry is such a beautiful explanation. And the other comment is Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. And then I was going to say another gift from the teacher is that of correction of our faults. When you said bruises, that was the comment from one of the viewers as well. Yes.
And that goes to the respect and the trust. The fact that I will bruise you, and I will teach you how to bruise each other with respect and love. Because when we get into a conflict, we have mahaba, right? We approach conflict with love, and we have to, we're dense creatures. Sometimes we have to be hit to awaken ourselves.
Subhanallah, very beautiful. What a contradiction. We have to, we address conflict with mahabba. I mean, how does one address conflict with love?
But, and this comes from Hazrati Ali alayhi salam, who tells us never react in anger. He had to raise al-Zulfikar to take other people's lives, but he would never do it. He would only do it with the blessing of Allah. And though we may never attain the station of him, we can use his example, which is, this person comes to me in confusion. It is not my job. I am not Allah. It is not my job to end their life. It is not my job to pass judgment on them. I must be a representative. I must be a wakil of Allah and stop them from what they were doing in the most quick manner possible, so that I can go about my day. And maybe they learn something, they get a free martial arts lesson. But I have to do that with love in my heart. Otherwise, I'm always carrying anger and I am not transforming.
Beautiful. Another question. What is the connection between silat and healing of the self? Why would you recommend silat to someone in need of healing?
It goes back to what the teachers, so when I was first invited to do this, 1,000 things came up. And I normally teach class somewhere between an hour and a half to 3 hours at a time, because we work really hard. We talk a lot, we eat together and share tea, and then we work really hard. So it's hard to pack it all into a half hour. But it starts with the body. We sit. Sitting is probably, here I am sitting, we're all sitting around our computers. Here's the pandemic, we're all on Zoom for our jobs. Sitting makes the muscles of the butt freeze. Half of my work in class is getting people to use the muscles of their legs and hips properly. So you ground yourself, you awaken the fascia, you limber the joints, right? You start with where you are and you move the best you can, but you have to move. You have to spend half an hour to an hour every day moving with breath and intention and grounding. Silat does that. Qigong does that. Tai Chi does that. I just happen to have studied with Sheikh to get a particular perspective on that. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. Alhamdulillah. Guru Reni, this has been exceptionally beautiful. We look at the whole symposium, and definitely Allah chose you to be the final speaker for a reason, because if we look at the beginning, and we had Sheikh Tanar and Sheikh Muzayyan explaining the whole concept of this connection and this tawheed and this oneness, and explaining the imbalance of, when we are not in balance, then we are sick, and the Rahman and Rahim, and then you're bringing the silat at the end, telling us, this actually conscious movement and conscious breath, focusing on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his beautiful names in movement can bring that healing, and will bring that healing, inshallah. So thank you so much, Guru Reni, for your time and for sharing the knowledge that Allah has blessed you with. And inshallah, we hope to hear soon from your classes, online classes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation and the time. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So viewers, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. All gratitude and praise goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granting us this opportunity to be here this entire week, for giving us the ability to be able to concentrate, to be able to give us this internet connection, to be able to present us with having this connection and this ability to be able to do what we are doing right now, and to have our teachers, Sufi Master Sheikh Tanar and Sheikh Muzayyan Ansari, creating this platform of the Ansari Holistic Healing Institute with the sole intention of helping, of supporting humanity, no matter who you are, which background you come from, where you come from, that's not the issue. It's about looking at the essence of you as a human being, and help is available. So where do I go from here? I've spent almost 10 hours this week listening to all these talks, I've gained so much of information. Has this information created a transformation in myself? That is deep point of reflection. How am I going to go from here? Where am I going to go from here? Where do I start? Who am I? So leaving you with all these questions, I'd like to share a conversation that Sheikh Tanner and I had in this week. Sheikh Tanner tells me, Rubina, it started with Allah, with God, and it's going to end with God, Allah. What happened in between? And this is today listening to Dr. Moola, and he's sharing all the so-called traumas, dysfunctional issues, whatever it was, that we came into this world to learn, to be able to experience, to go through whatever it was. This between where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that He is awwal and He is akhir. He is the beginning and He is the end. Sheikh Tanner there tells me, Rubina, we shifted our focus. We lost our focus. It's always Allah. We moved from the manifesto, the creator, Allah, to the manifested. And that's what Dr. Moola was speaking about, all these attachments that we had over the years that we grew up in, all the environmental attachments. And that's in the path of the Sufi path, we speak about the nafs. And the nafs is that part of ourselves that has these attachments to either the beliefs that we grew up with, the emotional trauma that we grew up with, the thoughts that we have, this internal dialogue that we believe that is who we are. Anything and everything that we attach ourselves to besides the Almighty is a distraction, is shifting our focus from Allah. From the Creator, we then focused on the creation. So what is now most important in my life? Is it my trauma? Is it my illness? Is it my spouse? Is it my children? Is it my money? Is it my thoughts? What is it? So, inshallah, we pray and we ask the Almighty for granting us this ability, to grant us this ability to be able to differentiate what is the attachment that we have that is not Allah. Remove all of that with the dhikr of La ilaha illallah. Remove all of that, and only Allah can help us. And then let's see who we truly are and move in that direction, inshallah. When we do that and we connect then to our hearts, and then Allah will guide us. Where do we begin? Should I focus on this in my healing journey? Should I focus on that? When I say focus, it meaning, Allah, you are the source. You are the source of healing. Please always remember, always remind me to focus on you. You say you are Ya Shafi, and I believe that you are the healer and the source of all healing. So let's not get stuck on the form of how the healing should be, or even the outcome of how it should be, but rather do the best that we can, wherever we go to, however we do, relating with each other, with humanity, with plants, with animals, with any of Allah's creation. We do our best to focus on Allah and not the manifestation, and not get stuck with that. And inshallah, God willing, transformation will happen and healing will happen. So with that, we thank you so much for joining us, taking time to listen to all the information. And we hope that with the mercy and blessing of the Almighty, this has been transformational for you, and you find what you are looking for, that we all find that peace and happiness that we are meant to be. That's Allah's salam. I just want to remind whoever feels inclined to join the class, there's a course. It's the e-course that we've been showing you right through every day of the program. It's absolutely beautiful and transformational. There's a lot of tools in there that we can learn. to get the nafs out of the way, the ego out of the way, our attachments away, and then become the better version of ourselves. It speaks about the complementary modalities within there. Speaks about, it also explains the anatomy and physiology, looks at all the different aspects of ourselves and helps us to get to know ourselves better. As we know, in the Quran, Allah says, when you remember me, I remember you. So Allah is giving us this invitation. You come to me, you remember me, and I will remember you. A beautiful invitation. So whenever we feel hopeless, we feel that we don't have anything to move forward to, just remember Allah and He will remember you. And then you move forward with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We thank you again, and we hope that your journey with Allah, by Allah, in Allah, be one that is successful. Ya Ghalib Ya Azim, Ya Ghalib Ya Azim, Ya Ghalib Ya Azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings to all of you. We'd like to thank the Almighty. We'd like to thank Sheikh Taner Ansari and Sheikh Muzayyan Ansari. We'd like to thank each one of your viewers for joining us. We'd like to thank our tech team for doing an amazing job behind the scenes. Without you guys, it would have been very difficult to be able to transmit this information. And of course, whoever else that we have forgotten to thank, we'd like to thank you too. And until next time, inshallah, maybe next year, our second International Holistic Healing Symposium, with Allah's permission. Salam.
Would you like to learn how to connect with Allah through His beautiful names? Would you like to learn how to heal using natural remedies and modalities? Would you like to cleanse yourself from any negativity, black magic and nazar? If you answered yes to these questions, then the Ansari Holistic Beginners Healing Course is for you. Empower yourself to healing. Add this knowledge to your current practice, or let it be a new beginning of hope for you. WhatsApp +27 82357 8666.